Hello, I'm Stan Stalnaker with Hub Culture, and we're at the C2ES event as part of Climate Week NYC, now in its 5th year here in beautiful New York. Joining me is Preston Chiaro, who's the Group Executive for Technology and Innovation at Rio Tinto, basically one of the world's largest mining operations and a supplier of just about everything in terms of commodities for the things that we know and love. Tell me a little bit about your involvement with Climate Week and what you guys are doing here. And then specifically, let's talk a little bit about how you guys are planning for resilience.
Sure. Rio Tinto has been addressing the issue of climate change for more than a decade. I was on a committee we put together in the mid-90s to look at key environmental issues that would be facing the company going forward. Climate change came to the top of the list.
Even back in the 90s?
Even back in the 90s. We put together a climate policy, an internal policy first, and then ultimately we published it for external consumption. We've been tackling this issue around climate change. We've been deeply involved in a lot of the political processes. We were a member of the U.S. Climate Action Partnership, for example, trying to get some certainty in government policy looking forward. And for us as an international mining company, we'd like to see alignment of policy across countries because frankly it would make it easier for us to run our business that way.
Aligning policy across countries must be like herding cats.
It is indeed. So we've given up on that for now. Maybe it will happen at some point. And I think over time there will be some convergence of approach by governments, but I think that's going to take some time. In the meantime, we have a business to run, and so we need to think about the impacts of a changing climate on our operations.
So how do you exactly invest toward resilience? Are you doing specific things to kind of counter this kind of looming risk?
We are indeed. We look at climate risk both from a top-down and a bottom-up point of view. From the top-down, we're mainly considering economic risks, the effects of government policy on energy pricing, for example, or on carbon emissions. From a bottom-up point of view, we're looking more at the mitigation of the effects of climate change, so sea level rise, more frequent storm events, those sorts of things. And we're having to build in that resilience to our physical facilities, because although we are mainly a mining company, we're heavily dependent on infrastructure.
But and that infrastructure takes a long time to build and it's expensive to output. So
it does indeed.
Foresight on your...
Yes, and so for example, in Australia, where we have a very large iron ore operation, we also run one of the largest heavy haul freight lines, rail systems in the world, and one of the largest port facilities in the world. In fact, we're the second largest shipper of bulk commodities in the world.
Wow.
So ports, rail facilities, water lines, power supplies, all those things are critically important to us, and they're all affected by the effects of climate change.
Yeah, so it's funny because in a way, a company like Rio Tinto almost has the most to lose from unmitigated climate change.
Well, that's true, but when we think about risk, we think about both threat and the opportunity. And we've been talking about threats to infrastructure, for example, to water supplies, to our local communities, but there are also opportunities built into climate change. So as an example, we produce aluminum, we produce borates. Those go into renewable power systems, so windmills, for example, or lightweighting components made out of aluminum. We also
so you're really providing the components of the clean energy economy.
Absolutely. And we're also very interested in countries like China, which currently is very heavily dependent on coal, but is making a shift to diversify their energy supply to renewables, but also to nuclear, and we're a big uranium producer. So we look for how we can protect our operations from the adverse effects of climate change, but we also look for business opportunities.
So it's a pretty big yard, right?
Yes, indeed.
But outside that yard, there are still external factors, whether it's the Chinese government or the American government or other competitors or just nature at large.
Yes.
How do you guys deal with things that are outside the fence?
Well, it depends on where you draw the fence line, of course. By its nature, our mines must go where the deposits are in the ground. So we have to make the local communities comfortable with our presence there doing these activities.
And I've heard that sometimes 75% of the value of a project is actually sideline infrastructure.
Absolutely. A good example of that is an iron ore mine that we're looking to develop in Guinea in West Africa. It's about a $20 billion project all in. About $5 billion of that is for the mine itself. The other $15 billion is for the rail lines, the ports, the power systems, the water supplies, the roads, all the infrastructure that's needed to support a massive operation like that.
But that actually literally builds the community around it.
It does. It's a nation-building project. Absolutely. That's why we try to involve people like the World Bank and the IFC and others to help work with the country to build out that infrastructure.
So the theme of the C2ES event today has really been about resilience.
Yes.
What's your takeaway from the event?
Well, I think resilience is a good way to frame the climate debate. It's about what you need to do to prepare for the future. And any good business has a resilience planning process, a risk management process.
Or they should if they want to be around.
They should if they want to be exactly in business for a long time. We've been in business for 140 years, and we'd like to do at least that many more. So we do have a risk management committee that I sit on and the CEO chairs. And we look at all the corporate risks, not only climate change, but things like a global epidemic or some economic disaster in some country, something like that.
Things outside defense.
But yes, absolutely. But climate is included in that list of top-down risk items. And we not only identify the risk, of course, but that's the easy part. What are you going to do about it if it manifests itself is the real question. Mm-hmm. And so we put in place mitigation measures for each one of those risks. And that's part of our resilience program. So in a sense, climate is just another dimension to an existing business risk management and resilience program.
Right, so it's part of the big picture.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much, Preston. Preston Chiaro from Rio Tinto, and I'm Stan Stalnaker at the C2ES event during Climate Week NYC. Thanks.
Thank you.